Hello and welcome to our investigation of Chapter 12. We're looking at globalization and its effect on religions. This is World Religion, and this is your last video. My name is Dr. Tim Harrison, and I am squirreled away somewhere in my private possum nest down in Bristol, Virginia. Now we are looking at something that is not religion, but is has a great effect on religion. And it's called globalization, and we see globalization in a lot of different ways, mostly in trying to open up barriers around the world for trade. Now, some people see globalization as something that is negative. For instance, the World Trade Organization believes that it hurts third world people. They believe that it leaves a great deal of debt. They think that it destroys tradition and that it destroys religious belief. They believe that world religions oppress people, particularly women. They believe that women should open themselves up and move away from some of their old world practices of religion. And women in some ways have led the struggle of the poor in the world in this idea of globalization. Now that's just sort of a negative worldview. I'm not saying that it's true. I'm saying that that's just the view that some people have. Some people have a very positive view of it. They believe that capital is a phenomenon that doesn't know boundaries, that people move capital wherever and it brings good results. Governments only interfere with the process. So if you're doing capital, for instance, one of the ways that we sort of brought down the Soviet Union in the 1990s is using capital, opening their markets up. China has changed a great deal because they have opened their markets up to capital. So some people see it as a way to improve the third world and other countries, particularly restrictive countries. They say that it provides better opportunities for people, education. It breaks down the barriers of poverty. Now, part of globalization is the concept of science. Science is sort of an international language, and it is seen as neutral. Okay, the investigations of science are shared around the world. We see common attitudes. Mathematics sort of becomes a defining language that we all know. Science is independent of religion. Many religions have problems reconciling their beliefs with science because science, of course, as a study, it begins with skepticism. It doesn't mean that you necessarily end up in skepticism, but that's certainly where you begin. You begin without an opinion. But there are conflicts between science and religion, and there are growing conflicts between politics and religion. There are political beliefs in the United States and others, somewhat directed toward pushing religion out of the public square, pushing it only into private lives where public devotion and public opinion and public mores are all pushed aside. This was part of the issue, if you were paying attention to the current events, of a recent decision by the Supreme Court that allowed Hobby Lobby to restrict the birth control that they offered to their employees. And some people would say that was a bad thing because religion should not in any way be allowed to push itself into business or the public sphere. It should only be a private activity. That's more common than you think. Of course, no one really says that, but many people who believe in globalization and opening up the world, opening borders and things of that sort, sees religion as a hindrance. Now, globalization can be effective in violence. Most religions discourage violence or move away from violence, but in some places we see this violence going on. We're seeing it a great deal right now in our world. Our world seems to be sort of on fire right now. So we're sort of seeing the effects of this. Much of it is it doesn't have as much to do with commerce as it does with old held beliefs at the moment. But globalization can bring that into focus as well. We see this in some ways with, for instance, the United States and Venezuela. Venezuela is a socialist country that does not allow capital markets. Globalization would say that capital markets would be a way of changing and improving the lives of Venezuelans. And that brings conflict because there's a conflict of ideas there. Okay? The primary goal of the global community is protecting human rights while expanding capital markets, resorting to limited violence, restricting violence, because again, look at what's happening in the Ukraine and in Israel and Gaza. Where there's violence, there is uncertainty. Where there's uncertainty, capital markets don't flow as well, and that's one of the things that you want to deal with. You'll find many of the issues as you read through this chapter. You're going to see a lot of issues that are current events and recent events, because they're sort of working its way out. We see some people who hold these very strong held convictions and religious belief. We see other people who want to restrict that, or at least put that only in the private sphere and take it out of the public arena. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this class. This is your last video. If you need another humanity class, I hope you'll consider one of my other classes. I teach Old Testament and New Testament, as some of you may already know, and I hope you'll consider that. Now, let me leave you with the last bit of wisdom from my hometown of Lexington, Georgia. There are many good things to live for, but when you find the truth, it's worth dying for. Have a great week.